everyone. So it's been a while since I've made some beauty lessons or shared what God has been speaking to me, showing me, or revealing to me, and He's been showing me a lot lately. So I wanted to share what God's been telling me and doing in my life. Because I think it's really powerful. When God speaks to us, it's really powerful. And when we share what He speaks to us, it can also feed others and bless others. So I pray that what God has been teaching me will bless you and encourage you and feed and nourish your soul and inspire you. So I was praying one night and I was just seeking the Lord, and as I was praying and journaling, I felt like God was telling me He wanted to temper me. I just was journaling saying, God, I don't want to be too much and I don't want to be too little. I want to be balanced. I want to stand where You're calling me to stand, but I don't want to be too hard where You're telling me to be more soft, and too soft where You're telling me to be more hard. So I was journaling about that, and I felt like the word tempered came to me, and I was like, temper me in Your spirit, God. I want You to temper me in Your spirit. And not fully knowing what the word meant, I looked it up. And to temper means to moderate or mitigate, to soften or tone down, to bring to a proper, suitable, or desirable state by blending or admixture, to moisten, mix, and work into proper consistency as clay or mortar, to import strength or toughness by heating and cooling, to produce internal stresses by glass by sudden cooling from low red heat, toughen. And there's another definition I didn't add in my journal that talks about tuning an instrument so that it can play different tones. So I thought to temper means to fortify and strengthen as well as to tone down. It means both. I thought that was very interesting, and I just prayed, temper me, Lord, toughen and soften me. Make me the suitable or desirable state by adding Your Holy Spirit to my life. Moisten and work me into the proper consistency for Your use. Change me, Jesus. I ask that You change me. And I was talking with my husband about this over dinner, the idea that God, wants to temper me. He wants to strengthen me. To strengthen is it says under pressure, to create, produce internal stresses, and to toughen by creating internal stresses. So to soften or tone down. I mean, it's just very interesting. So I was talking to my husband about this, and he said when a sword is tempered, the metal's pounded so that it becomes more flexible in battle, so that it can withstand more pressure without snapping. And I thought that's very interesting. God wants to temper me like a sword to be a mighty weapon in His hands. He wants to make me just the right amount, to toughen me as well as soften me, to make me flexible so that I don't snap under pressure. He wants to the image I was getting, when you moisten clay and work clay into the proper state, you are adding pressure, and you're pulling and stretching and pressing and twisting. And I'm sure if clay had feelings, it wouldn't feel very good to be molded and shaped, and it doesn't feel very good to us to have all this pressure and moving and molding and shaping. But God, works us into the proper consistency, and it only comes through pressure, and it only comes through His touch and His Spirit working on us. And like a sword is tempered or pounded, stress is put on it so that it can become more flexible. So I felt like God was telling me that He wants to kind of test me and try me and temper me so that I can become more soft, so I can become more flexible, so I don't snap under pressure. So I felt very blessed by that, and like God really was speaking to me. So I pray that that blesses you. But another thing is, I was thinking about God tempering me, and the next day I was journaling, and the words came to mind. Love is patient. I had been impatient earlier in the week, and I was thinking like, there's this impatience in me. And I thought, love is patient. And so I looked up, 1 Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind. So I looked up the word patient, and patient means bearing provocation, annoyance, misfortune, delay, hardship, pain, etc., with fortitude and calm, and without complaint, anger, or the like, quietly and steadily persevering or diligent, especially in detail or exactness, having or showing the capacity for endurance. And I thought that goes exactly along with God wanting to temper me. Being able to bear provocation and annoyance and misfortune without complaint and in calm and in fortitude. That ties in very much with God tempering me and seeking to fortify me and strengthen me under pressure. So I was just praying that God would teach me to love like him and to be patient like him, because God, is very patient and long suffering. And so I just thought that tied in with it. And then the very next day, so God was just speaking a lot. The very next day, and this is all within the last week, so God's faithful, or 10 days, last 10 days. But the very next day, I had this revelation. I was in prayer, and I just had this revelation. I'm not God. I am not in control. I am not the one who knows all things, who sees all things, who can decide everything. I am not God. And with that statement came a renewed trust and surrender, where I just said, God, I trust you. I surrender to you. I am so sorry for the ways that I have sought to take control, and I've sought to be God. And to make the right thing happen, because when I seek to be in control and make the right thing happen, when it doesn't happen how I wanted it to happen, I'm left disappointed and frustrated and not at peace and not at joy, because I was trying to impose my will instead of saying, God, let it be your will. You're in control. You're God. And God is so much more able to carry out his will than we are. He is so much more able and faithful to carry out his will than we are to carry out our own will, or even seek to carry out his will without him or apart from him. God is so much more able to carry out his will. So to trust him and say, God, you be in control. You carry out your will. I will obey. I will submit. I will trust and do what you say. But your will be done, not my will. So I was praying about that. And as I was praying, I kind of realized that I had a lot of disappointment in my heart. And I prayed, God, take my disappointment, take my deepest disappointments. And in the moment I had prayed, turn them into blessings. But later as I was journaling, I thought, turn them into delights. Take my disappointments and turn them into delights. And immediately I thought of Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. So I was asking God to take the disappointments of my heart and to turn them into delights. And God said, delight yourself in the Lord, and I'll give you the desires of your heart. So God is so faithful to speak to us when we seek him and when we trust him, and when we really in prayer say, God, I need this to change, or I want you to help me, and be honest and transparent, because for me to hide my disappointment wasn't helping. But God was bringing it to the surface, and I acknowledged it. I said, God, I'm disappointed. There's disappointments in my heart in these areas. And God showed me that I hadn't been delighting in him, and it ties into the control in seeking to be God and seeking to because I want to make sure the right thing happens. And so instead of trusting God and saying, you make the right thing happen, I'm saying, okay, God, I know what the right thing is. I'm going to make it happen. And that's not how God wants to do it. He always wants to be in control. He always has to be the one in charge, the one on the throne. We're the servants. We're the subjects. We're the ones who are submitted to him and trust him. So God was showing me, don't be in control. Let me be in control. Trust in me. Delight yourself in me, and I'll give you the desires of your hearts. So I felt like God, and I was just pouring out my heart. There's a verse in Psalm 68 that says, pour out your hearts like water before the presence of the Lord. I think it's Psalm 68, or it's verse 8 of some psalm in the 60s. Maybe it's 61 or something. But I was just pouring out my heart like water before the Lord, and he really told me, delight yourself in me. I'll give you the desires of your heart. So there's power to pouring out your heart like water before the Lord. There's power to trusting him and being vulnerable and honest with God about the really hard things, and not just saying, well, this is how I should feel, so I'm just gonna, pull myself up by the bootstraps and make myself feel this way. That's not how it works. We have to be honest and vulnerable and transparent, and then leave those things with God and let him fill us. It's like a trade. We give our sadness and our negativity and our difficulty and our heaviness and our burden to God, and then he gives us joy and peace and life in exchange. But we have to make the trade. We can't deny what's actually here. We have to be honest about it and transparent about it, and really share it with God and say, God, I need you to help me. That's where true freedom is. It is in transparency and vulnerability and honesty. And so many people live in denial and self-denial. When God begins to bring these things to the surface, people say, that can't be in me. I won't let that be in me. And then they stuff it right back down instead of letting it come up and out and truly be dealt with. The next thing that God showed me was, it was around my birthday, and I was just praying, and I felt like God was saying, I don't want you to live with burdens. And I feel like I've lived burdened or heavy at times, and picking up other people's burdens and making them my burden. And God said, I don't want you to live heavy or burdened. I want you to live light. I want you to delight in me. And I was praying, and I thought of several different verses. One that came to mind was Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And I thought, God, I'm missing something. I don't feel like that's my life all the time. If that is what is supposed to happen in the Christian life, that we're supposed to have an easy yoke and a light burden in your spirit, no matter what's going on, no matter what's happening, I'm missing it. I'm not letting you bear my burden. I'm bearing the burden. And so I thought of this verse in Psalm 68. It says, in 68:19, it says, praise be to the Lord, to God our Savior, who daily bears our burdens. God daily bears our burdens. And I thought, God, I'm not letting you bear my burdens. I'm not letting you be God. I'm not trusting you. I'm not surrendering it all to you. I'm carrying it. And so I felt like, God, I just want this to be the year where I live burden-free or pressure-free, where I trust you with every moment of every day, where you're in control of everything. On my birthday, I was talking with my husband, and we were thinking about the idea, somehow it came up, the idea of eternity, and how if you realized that you had eternity, we were talking, I think, about people who lived to be 900 years, like way back when in the beginning. And it's like, if you had 900 years, being 30 was like nothing. You had so much time in your life. You wouldn't be under so much pressure. And I thought, well, I have eternity. I don't have much time in this life, but I have eternity. So what would it mean to transition my being into an eternal understanding and an eternal clock, and really focus on what's important and let go of what doesn't matter? So there's that. But as I was journaling and going back to reading Psalm 68, 2 verses before Jesus daily bearing our burdens, or God daily bearing our burdens, is Psalm 68:17. It says, the chariots of God are tens of thousands and thousands of thousands. And I thought, tens of thousands and thousands of thousands? Thousands of thousands, isn't that millions? And I thought of the story in 2 Kings where Elisha says to his servant, he prays that God would open his servant's eyes to see that those who were with them were more than those who were with the enemy. And so I went to 2 Kings, and this was the next day. I went to 2 Kings. So God just leads me along and carries me along. He's so faithful. When I go back to see how God showed me and led me to things and revealed things to me, I'm so blessed and so grateful. So journaling is a great habit. If you don't journal, I would encourage you to journal. Even if you don't journal very much, just write a few verses down, or write 1 or 2 thoughts down. Your journal's for you. It's not for anyone else. But, to see a pattern, it helps to see themes or ways God's moving and working. And you can go back and thank him. It produces gratitude and joy. That's what it's producing in me. Gratitude and joy for what God's spoken to me and the way he's led me there. So in 2 Kings, I read it's in chapter 6 where Elisha prays that God would open the eyes of his servant to see all those who are with them, all the chariots of God who are with them. Well, Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes and looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So, and then he says, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. So those who are for us are more than those who are against us. And I actually began to continue to read because I thought, this is interesting. You know, what else happens with Elisha's life? Because Elisha was a very powerful man of God. And I actually just read today that someone who died while they were an army was coming, they were burying this guy, and someone was coming to attack them, and they threw this man's body with in Elisha's tomb and with his bones, and his body touched Elisha's bones, and then he came to life. So I thought that was very interesting. I had never read that or had forgotten about it, but that's just a side note. So I was reading in chapter 6, and I felt like God really showed me something. So in chapter 6, there's this famine, and Israel is under siege. They're being attacked by the Arameans, by the Arameans. And if I'm saying that right. And this woman, the king is out walking on the wall, and this woman says, help me. And he says, what's the matter? And this woman said, well, yesterday a woman came to me and she said, let's boil your son and eat him, and tomorrow night we'll boil my son and eat him. So they boiled the first woman's son and ate him, but the next day the second woman hid her son, so they didn't eat him, which is crazy. But the king says, I'm going to kill Elisha, and he sends a messenger to Elisha to kill him. And Elisha knows he's coming, and he says to the messenger, this is the word of the Lord. Tomorrow, flour will sell for a shekel, which I guess at that point, like, food was very scarce and selling for way more than that. But he said, flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. And the officer said, look, if the Lord should open the floodgates of heavens, how could this happen? Like, could this really happen? And Elisha says, you'll see it with your own eyes, but you won't take part in any of it. So the next day, there's these 4 men, and they have leprosy, and they're at the entrance of the city gate, and they say, look, if we stay here, we die. If we go into the city, we die. Let's go to the Aramean army and see what happens. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, we die. So we're going to die lots of different, there's lots of opportunities for us to die, but let's see if there's a chance we can live. And lepers are people who were avoided, who were like basically the scum of the earth in ancient times. Lepers were feared, avoided. Nobody wanted to touch them. No one wanted to be near them. So they're a weak thing of the world. So they go to the Aramean army. At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there, for the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittites and Egyptian kings to attack us. So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. And the men who had leprosy reached the end of the camp, entered one of the tents, and ate and drank. So they begin to plunder the Aramean camp. And they end up going and telling the king of Israel, the Arameans have fled and we've got food and all their stuff. But I was thinking, what God showed me is when we seek to satisfy our own hunger apart from Him, we devour ourselves. So the woman ate her own son. She, like that, to think about that, that's horrible. That's grotesque. It's like, wouldn't it be better to die than to eat your own son? So when we trust on our own selves for survival, instead of trusting in the Lord, and had she waited, think about it, had she waited 2 days, there would have been food. But instead, she ate her own son 2 days before there was food. So when we try to satisfy things ourselves, our hunger for ourselves, we end up destroying our own kind or devouring ourselves. But when we trust God, He sends chariots to cause our enemy to flee. So God uses the weak things of the world and the despised things of the world to shame the wise and to shame the strong. God used lepers to go and find, the Aramean camp empty. He used the weak things of the world. So God was telling me, when we trust in ourselves and we try to satisfy our ravenous hunger, because they were starving, and our ravenous hunger can be for approval, affirmation, love, relationships. We can be hungry for marriage. We can be hungry for children. We can be hungry for all these desires, all these things that we want. Our souls can be starving. And instead of trusting God and saying, God, cause my enemies to flee so I can receive from you, we end up eating our own or eating ourselves and committing great sin and trying to satisfy. When we try to satisfy our hunger, our soul hunger ourselves, we end up like the woman who ate her own son. But when we trust in God and we let Him satisfy our hunger, we end up like the lepers who find the camp empty and plunder it. So I just felt like God was really showing me that I need to trust Him, to delight myself in Him, and let Him satisfy the desires of my heart. Let Him give me the desires of my heart. And I pray that blesses you, and you trust God and you let Him give you the desires of your heart. One of the last things that I want to share, I guess that's pretty much it. That's what God was showing me. But I pray that blesses you. I pray that you really let God satisfy the desires of your heart, that you pour out your heart like water before Him, that you surrender to Him, that you trust Him, that you give Him control, and you let Him be the one who feeds you. If you feel like your soul is under siege and Satan has just routed you and there's or surrounded you, and there's armies all around and you have no food and you're starving, really turn to God and ask Him to cause your enemy to flee, to send His chariots, His thousands and tens of thousands, His tens of thousands and thousands of thousands chariots, and cause your enemy to flee so that you can feast and be filled and be satisfied, because trusting in God is better than trusting in yourself. It's better than trusting in what you think you want or the only way you think you can accomplish things. I pray that you trust in God and really let Him cause your enemy to flee. There's a verse in Psalm 143 that says, "Let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love, for I have put my trust in you. Show me the way to go, for to you I entrust my life. Rescue me from my enemies, Lord, for I hide myself in you. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. May your good spirit lead me on level ground." So I pray that that's your prayer today, and that God shows you the way to go and He rescues you from your enemies because you hide yourself in Him, because you're surrounded by Him, covered by Him, protected by Him. You run to Him instead of to other things, instead of to self-protection, instead of trying to satisfy your desires yourself, instead of trying to make the right thing happen by being in control. I pray you surrender to God, you trust in Jesus, and you really let Him be God and really let Him rescue you and save you. Thanks for watching. Bye.